Okay, if everyone is ready, welcome to our Monday session. Just waiting for the last few people to come in. Anybody here not done meditation before? Okay, good. So, we're going to sit together for a while, then have some Dhamma reflection, a little bit of question and answers, and we will be done by 8 o'clock. So, okay. So, settle yourself into your meditation posture. Please feel free to practice the meditation system you are accustomed to. I'll give a few pointers. Feel free to use them, use what I say or not, according to your preference. Always start the meditation with the resolution that this is the time for meditation. This is not the time for planning, thinking, worrying. It's not the time for projecting into the future or worrying about the past. Make the resolution to yourself every time you meditate. For this period of time, I'm going to simply be present. Any thoughts that arise, even if they are important and need to be thought about, we will consider them later. But just for this half an hour, this is the time to meditate. That way, you establish firmly the resolution to put aside any of the thinking, the stories that arise. Put your attention onto your meditation object, whatever that may be. If you're unsure about the meditation object, I recommend that you use the sensation of breathing as it runs through the center of the body. If the breath is short, you know that. If the breath is long, you know that. Feel the whole body. If you follow the sensation of the breath, it runs down the center of the body, just in front of the spine. You may know the breath separates into lungs, but the feeling of the breath, the prana, the sensation, runs right the way down to the seat. So we want to track the sensation of the breathing. This is not exciting, it's not dull. It's a neutral object. It doesn't arouse greed or desire. It doesn't arouse aversion or disliking. Put your mind onto this neutral object helps to bring your mind to a calm space. And note the tendency of the mind to always be looking for something that it likes or dislikes. Always wants to think about, to feel, to hear things that it likes and dislikes. We're always drawn to this stimulation. The meditator trains themselves to be content with a neutral object, to value the peace and the calm above the excitement or interest, desire or aversion. This meditation object is the place you can always return your attention. If your attention is quite strong and your mindfulness quite steady, note your mind will wander off to different things: a sound, thought, memory, feeling. Every time the mind wanders off, we call this an object, a new object of attention, because you are attending to that thing. Anything whatsoever that arises in perception, don't get involved with it. It's just a thought, it's just a sound, it's just a feeling. If it draws you in to think about, to listen to feel, find some way to disengage yourself. Or just hold your attention patiently. That thing just came into your attention. Maintain your mindfulness. It will disappear. If your attention gets stronger still, note, you don't need a meditation object. You're just there, bright, present, still. The mind not attaching to any object. You may feel it gathering inwardly, centering itself, becoming brighter. If this is your experience, do your meditation from the bright body. No need for a meditation object. Just know when your mind is reaching out to some object and when it's not. As the mind gathers inwardly, becomes brighter, you may experience this. Become the bright body, continue the meditation. You may experience piti, rapture, arising as an energy through the middle of the body, energizing, concentrating, very pleasant. If this happens, you can use this rapture as your guide. Feel when it's being increased, when the mind is steadying in it, and when the mind gets lost in some object of attention. You may feel happiness arise, a sense of contentment. If this happiness arises, independent of any sensory object, you can move into that experience. This is called a third jhana. The scriptures say, the devas praise you for this condition and say that you dwell in a pleasant abiding. Always approach the meditation without expectations. Sometimes your mind will concentrate, will come together. Sometimes we'll be terribly distracted. Sometimes it will be dull. Sometimes bright. approach your meditation with patience. This is a long game. Lifetimes you can be doing this practice. So don't have too many expectations, but do be willing to put in the effort, the energy. We're going to sit together for another 15 minutes or so. Center your mind bright and as still as you can. Call into the mind the idea of gratitude. We are trying to arouse a beautiful mind state, sobanajita. Not just being mindful, not just being aware, but calling into mind this beautiful mind state. So much to be grateful for. But we spend all our time thinking about the things that we don't like or the things we want to get. And forget about the appreciation for the things we have. Your health is good enough. Our society is peaceful, free from war, floods, fires, fighting. Good enough. Requisites, from money to lodging, transport. Good enough friends and family. We have so much to be grateful for. We spend so little time being grateful. So at the end of every meditation session, we call into mind one of these beautiful mind states. The idea today of gratitude and appreciation. Any way that you can think of to arouse this feeling is okay. Hang on to that feeling. Try to encourage it, arouse it, maintain it. The more often you deliberately call and generate a mind state, the easier it is for that mind state to arise again in the future. It's hard to feel gratitude if you never feel it. It's easy to feel gratitude and appreciation if you continually, deliberately generate, call it into mind, meditate on it. So just for the last minute of the meditation, make the mind beautiful, appreciating all the things that we have. Sabbe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahanta nancha tejena rakang bandami sampaso sabba buddha nubhavena sattha soti bhawantute sabbe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahanta nancha tejena rakang bandami sampaso Sabba Dhamma nubhavena sattha soti bhawantute Sambe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang Arahanta nancha tejena rakang bandami sabbha so Sabba sangha nubhavena sattha soti bhawantute. Okay, relax your posture. Can you check that your phones are turned off? Forgot about mine. I was worried all the way through it'd be my phone that goes off. Okay, this evening I wanted to do some real hardcore Dhamma, if that's all right with you. Look, sometimes I will have to talk for beginners, try and take baby steps from the beginning. Sometimes we should talk about metta, loving kindness, or patience, or morality. Many of these things that are foundations of Buddhism. But sometimes also we should talk about the hardcore, real Dhamma. So today is hardcore. In specific terms, is a particular sutta called the Bahya Sutta. Some of you may have heard of or may come across again in the future. But before I get onto the sutta, I have to back it up a little bit and address some of the core structures of consciousness that the Buddha was pointing to. Firstly, I'd like to note that Buddhism is a mystic tradition. That is, we are heading into that mystery, that completely otherness that is separate or above or transcendent to all regular things. This is what saints and sages have been doing in every culture across the world, in every age. We've always found these people who separated themselves from society, went to the forests and the mountains and the caves to enter into, in Christian terms, if you forgive me for using Christian terms, I'm not sure they have copyright, but we will. This mystic union with God is often called in Christian mystic terms. Or enter into this otherness or transcendent state of knowing or of being that the Buddha said will finalize in enlightenment. Now, what is enlightenment? We can speculate and guess and talk about, but what's most important for us today, and certainly in this sutta, is what we do to practice towards this. But I want to make this clear, that there is an ultimate attainment that is the object or the focus or the goal of spiritual traditions or enlightenment traditions. I say this because there can be a lot of misdirection into lesser attainments and lesser goals. For example, I have some friends who talk a lot about the spiritual path and the work, they say, the work that we have to do, the work on yourself, fixing your psyche and your psychology to try and become somebody who is, in this particular group, they focus on defense mechanisms. So you are someone who does not engage in denial, suppression, repression, asceticism, 16 different defense mechanisms. So that is a way of overcoming suffering, our psychological suffering that comes up because of the way our self or the ego is constructed. And this is, at best, pseudo-psychology. And a lot of the schools and teachers these days focus on this kind of pseudo-psychology. I say that I am myself, I have a degree in psychology, so I know what I'm talking about in psychological terms. So that can become like a lesser goal, that I'm going to try and fix myself into becoming a more beautiful or more spiritual person. That's a good goal. I'm not going to denigrate that. We should all try and better ourselves, otherwise, what is the point of a practice? Morality can be another lesser goal. Try to become a person who's good. In fact, this will usually solve all your psychological problems automatically by itself if you are living in a fairly decent and righteous manner. But a lot of these lesser goals remove the focus from the actual attainment or the actual goal of mystic spiritual traditions, which is this thing that in Buddhism is called awakening, sambodhi, is called enlightenment, nibbana, it's called the liberation of the heart, ceta vimutti. Well, my favorite word in Buddhism was ceta vimutti jnana dasana, which means jnana, to know, dasana, to see, jedo, the citta, the heart or the mind, vimutti, liberation, to see and to know the liberation of the heart. This was one of the many descriptions that the Buddha gave for this thing to which he was continually pointing. If one reads the suttas, the original teachings of Sakyamuni Buddha, sutta after sutta after sutta, text after text, all are pointing towards this ultimate goal. This is a mystic path of entering into that mystery, into that different area of the mind that is unlike all other areas, all other things. And this can be done through faith, bhakti yoga. It can be done through force of will, raja yoga. It can be done through perfect balance, hatha yoga. It can be done through perfecting your karma, called karma yoga. But that's 4 of the yogas. The 5th yoga, jnana yoga, which means seeing what is real and unreal, or the way of insight. The Buddha, Sakyamuni Buddha, he taught the way of insight, or the way of wisdom. By the way, and don't worry too much about this, but there is a legend of this, that the Buddhas, who are someone who has attained to this, made this attainment, are of 3 kinds. A faith-based Buddha, sattva, faith-based Buddha, a wisdom-based Buddha, and a heroic struggle-based Buddha. So each one of these is 10 times greater than the one before him. So the faith-based Buddha is the least. The wisdom-based Buddha is the middle, and that's Sakyamuni Buddha that we follow. And the heroic struggle, Virya Buddha, actually will be the next Buddha, Maitreya Buddha, when he comes. And he will have 10 times the influence that Sakyamuni Buddha had because of his heroic struggle. Or because they'll have internet when he comes back and have wider reach, I don't know. Anyway, I wouldn't pay too much attention to these, but these kind of myths and legends kind of structure our way of thinking a little bit. Personally, I like the idea of wisdom more than I like the idea of heroic struggle. I'd rather get enlightened through wisdom and working my way through it than I would through sitting in heroic struggle. There's actually a story of a man he's quite famous in Thailand, so I won't say his name, because he's still alive. But he went to Wat Mahatat, Section 5, international section of the Thai temple in Bangkok. And he went like, okay, what do I do for meditation? And the teacher said, on the breath in, you say Bud. On the breath out, you say To. He said, do this. So he sat there all night long, Butto, 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 and he attained into perfect jhanas, samadhi, concentration, attained into psychic powers, saw the devas. And then the next morning the teacher came and said, how are you doing? And he said, yeah, I've done it all. And the teacher was like, blimey, no one's supposed to really do that. So that's a heroic struggle. He went in and he just worked himself as hard as he possibly could, and he made all these attainments that night. One would assume or hope that he had the right karma for it. Because I also have gone and sat and said, I'm going to meditate all night. And usually by morning I find myself waking up, having fallen asleep somewhere in the meantime. So that, I think, might be the heroic struggle kind of Buddhism. Sakyamuni Buddha taught wisdom-based Buddha, Jnana Yoga, which means separating real from unreal. And he outlined the structure of consciousness. Thus, he said, because of your eye and your eye meeting objects of sight, eye consciousness arises because you put attention onto it. That thing now is your conscious awareness. Then that will cease and your eye will go to some other object. And now that thing will come up as the object of consciousness. Then that will cease and your ear will go to a sound and that will come up as the object of consciousness. And this is the actual experience of consciousness to a meditator who is actually looking at things as they really are. This very unstable nature of consciousness you bind together in stories to help you navigate the world. It's necessary. So for example, you say to yourself, you've come here tonight and you've sat for a while and you've listened to me for a while and thought about a few things, and that's your structure for what you did here this evening. But if you are a good meditator, you'll see that's not the actual experience that you have. Sitting here, your mind will listen to me for a few moments, then your bum will feel uncomfortable and you'll shift your position. While you're shifting position, your attention is on that, not on what I'm saying. Then your ear will go to somebody coughing in the background, or a mobile phone that starts ringing. Now your consciousness moves onto that thing. Once the person turns off their phone or answers the phone, you think to yourself, did I turn off my own phone? Now the thing in consciousness is your phone. So one thing after another thing after another thing, your consciousness, your conscious attention, manasikara, the Pali word, will shift or flit from object to object to object. You tie this together by using stories. But if you are observant, this is what you actually experience. So if you're a reasonable meditator and you sit, your experience will be the mind jumping around. Then you think to yourself, my mind jumps around. Actually, it's always like this. You simply don't pay attention because you are caught in stories, binding this experience together. So if you experience this jumping mind when you're meditating, note, you are starting to see things as they really are, or you are starting to experience consciousness as it really is. I want to be careful saying things as they really are, because there's many ways to understand things in the world of politics and ecology and planets and physics and engineering. There's many ways to understand things. But this is observing consciousness as it actually is. The mind moves from one thing to another thing to another thing. The Buddha described it this way. It's like a monkey swinging through the forest, grabs hold of one branch, lets go, grabs hold of another branch, lets go, grabs hold of another branch. And note, while your consciousness is on one thing, all other things have disappeared. While you are listening to that sound, you are not feeling the feelings in your feet. If you put your attention onto the feelings in your feet, you are not tasting the taste on your tongue. If you put your attention there, you are not hearing the sounds in your ear. Try this. Experiment. See if you can hold two things in the mind at the same time. Can you hold the sound of the air conditioner and the feelings in your toes at the same time? For a second or two, it feels like you can do it, and then you're going to be jumping from one to the other, trying to keep it going. And while you are trying to feel the feelings in your toes and listen to the air conditioner, you're definitely not seeing the Buddha image to my right here. So your conscious attention will move. You will attend to one thing at a time. It certainly doesn't feel like that for regular conscious awareness. It feels like we're aware of many, many things. But the meditator will note this spotlight effect of consciousness, the way it's constructed. So, in Buddhist terms, we say that the mind goes to an object of hearing or smelling or sound or past or the future, however you want to divide it up. The mind will go onto that particular thing and dwell there for a while before moving on to another thing. This image of the monkey swinging through the forest was not about having a busy mind. It was not about being a modern day person or a mother trying to juggle 2 children and a job and visas and food and work and car insurance. I think just visas is bad enough. No, he was saying this is the actual experience of every human mind. This is the architecture of consciousness if you pay attention to it, which is our job as a meditator. So what happens? The mind going out to this object, moving on to that object, moving on to another object. I say object, you can say object of sense. You can say attending to. I like that word. It's translation of the Pali word manasikara, to attend to. If you look at this Buddha image, you are attending to it, to the exclusion of the things you can hear or feel. What happens if you hold your mind in restraint, not attending to any particular object, including objects of meditation? Note, when you attend to an object, it will have an effect on you, depending on whether you like it or you dislike it, or the nature of it. So if you put your attention onto a Buddha image and you respect the Buddha, you'll feel a certain kind of peace. If you are a strong Christian, thou shalt not bow thine head to graven images. You may feel a slight disturbance looking at a Buddha image. I know some Christians have reported this to me. If you put your attention onto Thai visa application process, your mind will become agitated and upset and disturbed. If you put your attention onto fluffy kittens, your mind will become, hopefully, into loving kindness, compassion, joy. So your state of mind depends upon the object on which you are focusing. I've told this story before, but I like the story. I had a friend who was like this, and he was very, very busy in his mind. He was quite an impressive man. He did some impressive multimedia projects, which I worked with him on. But he would become very animated every time you mentioned something. So I'd say to him, isn't it nice living here in Bangkok and not in Austria? He said, oh, Austria, the weather's so bad. Here I can sit outside and it'd be all bright. And then I would say, yeah, but those boats are noisy, aren't they? He said, oh, the boats, why don't they make the boats quiet? The government should. And he'd be into this animated disliking. And then I would say, wow, this is really nice bread that you've got today. Oh, I just found this bread shop. And he'd be all I could literally flip him like a remote control. I could, whatever I want, I could flip his mind into. Because I make him attend to an object. If you have good mindfulness, you will be less susceptible to the states of mind getting, in Thai, yindi, yin rai, means excited and, I don't know, yin rai, getting excited or getting dismayed. If one is mindful, this will start to hopefully lessen. One will start to appreciate the peace or the mindfulness or the presence more than simply being drawn into the thing you are attending to. But note, your meditation object is still just another thing, right? Still just something else to attend to. So if you put your attention onto the breath, it's still just another thing to attend your mind to. If you're comfortable with the breath, it will feel pleasant. If you are accustomed to meditation, you can get very still, because the breath is very still. In, out, but then it's just breath. And the mind can become very still, and people mistake this for deep meditation. Still not. It's just putting your attention onto something else. It's quietening the mind, which has a value and a benefit, but still not proper meditation. What happens when you withdraw your attention from every object? Whatever the mind goes out to, including your meditation object, you don't get caught or involved in that. So the actual words of the Buddha went like this. He sees an object, well, having the eye and having objects to see, his mind attends to that object. He does not get caught in the signs and features of that thing, lest unwholesome mind states would invade. He holds himself with restraint regarding the eye sense. Having the ear and sounds, his mind goes out to the sounds, attending to them. But he does not get caught in the signs and features of that sound. He holds himself with restraint in regards to the ear sense, the nose sense, taste sense, the body sense. So yes, even the breathing. If your mind gets stuck or caught in that object of breathing, sure, you can make yourself peaceful or still, but that's still not it. You still are caught in this cycle of consciousness or cognizing objects. The mind goes to mind objects. So you remember something from the past, you plan something in the future, you get caught, indulge in a fantasy. It has a lure, it brings your mind in, brings your attention, but you do not get caught in the signs and features of that mind object. With all six senses here, the Buddha is saying by this time, to the advanced meditator, you are not putting your attention onto anything. You're simply holding yourself in restraint. Some things will start to happen at this point. And I'm going to mention these because for many, many years I was practicing and nobody mentioned these signposts, and I was practicing in the wrong way. Some things will happen. One is you can feel very sleepy or tired. The mind seems to say to itself, well, if you're not going to get me involved in my fantasies and my thoughts and my worries and my plans and my dreams, then I'm going to clock off and go for a nap, and it shuts down. And meditators get accustomed to this. The mind shuts down and kind of goes to sleep, but you're still sitting there. And then the bell goes, and you're, was I awake, or was I meditating? I feel quite peaceful. Is that it? Have I attained to concentration and jhana? Was I asleep? The mind shuts down. The mind can also get caught in agitation. Not having something to do can be quite agitating to some people. So the mind starts to ramp up its activity. Worry harder, think harder, plan harder. And so the mind starts to pull you around. You can get caught up in doubting. Like, well, is this it? Is this not it? Is this, can I do it? My mind is too agitated. I have too much thinking. I have too many desires. I have too many things to do. I live in the wrong age. If I was born in the Buddha's age, it'd be less to do. They wouldn't have internet and phones and visas. So then I could get enlightened. But now, no, I can't, because I'm in the wrong age, or I'm too old, or I'm too young, or I'm married. Whatever it is, I can't meditate, I'm English. You have to be German to practice concentration meditation. You have to be like the Thais. I would sit there in England when I was a novice, and you see the Thais come in, and then they sit beautifully, and you're like, man, I've been here for a year, and I'm scratching, I'm shuffling, I'm moving. I'm definitely, I should be reborn as a Thai. Buddha did say that if you set your mind on a rebirth and you have virtues of character, you can be reborn in that place. Of course, you probably find that that place isn't so good as you thought it was. I'm pretty sure I was Thai in my previous lifetime, and I decided I wanted to be reborn in England, which is a more developed and advanced country. And having done that, I'm like, nah, I've come back to Thailand. Like, that was not a good goal. So, a lot of excuses can arise as you meditate. Also, a lot of doubting in the method. So, expect a lot of these things to start to arise, and you have to have patience to get through it. This is a long-term plan. You're not going to get enlightened because somebody gave a good Dhamma talk and then you just understood it and now you know what to do. This is something that comes from practice. Just like tennis or learning the piano, nobody can come and tell you how to play the piano and then you can do it. You're going to have to practice it. Same with meditation. Doesn't matter how good the Dhamma talk is, you're going to have to learn to navigate the architecture of your own consciousness. But at some point in the meditation, or often for a meditator, they experience these things when they're not meditating. The mind can suddenly come together, no longer reaching out to any other object. Now, if the mind isn't attending to anything, one would assume, logically, it would become dull, or just, we call the dial tone from God. I don't know. These days you don't have dial tones on phones, so I think there's only kind of people my age and up. Remember dial tones? You know, when the person hangs up on you and you just get this. One would assume if you're not attending to any object, everything is going quieter and quieter and duller and stiller until eventually, but that's not what happens. There comes a moment when suddenly the mind will come together. Will gather, literally the Buddha used this word gather and centrify and unify. It becomes bright, it becomes powerful. Note this when it starts to happen, because it does for most people, but they tend to reject it or go back to their breathing meditation or their mantra meditation. And this is what happened to me for many, many years. Decades, in fact. As I'd start to suddenly brighten, I'd be like, oh, I must be doing it right, and I'd come back to my breath, and then it's the wrong way. So, when the mind comes together in this manner, you enter into that mind, drop all meditation objects, drop attending to anything. But feel your way through from this brightness and the power that starts to arise. It will come through the center of the body. It's called, in the Pali, first stage is called Vitakka Vichara. Vitakka means to throw or to point to. Vichara means to continue to hover around like a bee hovers around a plant that it's going to land on. So the mind becomes very still, very directed. You know instantly when the mind starts to pick up an object of thought, of memory, of feeling, and you know when the mind is gathering, because you can feel it gathering together, unifying. This is not stillness. Stillness is, I can go on a beach and feel stillness. It's kind of nice. But that's not the same thing. As the mind gathers together in this, the next state, this is called first jhana, or concentration, meditation. And it's important to note because so many of the texts give the wrong advice. They say you concentrate on an object, like the breathing or a mantra. No, you have to let go of that object. This is where I made my mistake for 25 years. I didn't understand this. So I never wanted to concentrate because it felt like too much effort. When my mind gets very bright and powerful, I want to stay there. I don't want to concentrate on an object. I didn't realize the object of meditation gets in the way when you start to attain in the right way. Piti can arise, rapture, they call rapture. It's an energization that comes through the body. It will make you sit up straight and alert and hard, but without you making an effort, without you directing it. It will do it automatically by itself. It will run through the body and be bright and powerful. You are not sleeping. You are not still. You're not being quiet. There's a gathering of forces and power and energy and brightness. You can use that rapture as your guide. Go into it and feel it. Drop whatever meditation objects you are using. Go into that. Happiness, sukha, can come up. There is a feeling of contentment that there is nothing left to do. Because any happiness that comes, or any pleasure that comes in the world, comes from attaining or getting something that you like. Vegemite on toast. That'll give you happiness, unless you're American. Do you eat Vegemite? Do you eat Vegemite? Marmite? You like it, right? Seeing a TV program that you like to watch, or talking to somebody you like to talk to, reading a book you like to read. Always happiness comes from the thing you are attending to. But when you stop attending to anything, sukha arises, happiness, independent of any object. The Buddha said, this is the happiness in which I will indulge. After that, the fourth stage, equanimity. But there is a trick to equanimity, this word, equanimity, upekkha. One can feel equanimity when you stop caring too much. So if you've had a really good sandwiches and you're sat on a beach, thinking, I was in Australia a few years ago and I sat on a beach and we'd had really good sandwiches. There's 3 of us and the weather was nice. I was like, I don't need to think about anything. But that's an equanimity that isn't born from meditation. It's an equanimity that's born from the surrounding that you're in. Real upekkha is really bright and powerful and focused without needing any external thought or feeling or sensory input. So these are your guides for meditation. In each case, be willing to drop what you were doing before and go into the more and more refined state. Be sure, be aware that this is not stillness, this is not quiet, but this is a powerful, bright, you are not sleeping, you are not. What the Buddha called equanimity based on diffusion. Pali word is papancha, on scattered. So equanimity based on being scattered is when the mind is not brought together and centered. The equanimity that arises from one-pointedness is very different. These are the real spiritual experiences. These are the things that, in fact, you will have touched on, but because few people mention it, because there is so much focus on sorting out your ego or your defense mechanisms or letting go of suffering or following morality, all good points, all supporting factors. But no one ever talks about this actual experiences as they come up. So I'm mentioning them to you today, so that as they arise, you will note this and start, oh yes, that's what was talked about, and you can follow it. This is particularly important to me personally, because nobody mentioned these things. All my teachers said, whatever it is that arises, you just let go. And you can get into a state of like, I'm letting go, I'm free, nothing's going to affect me. It's just an ego trip, it's just a thing you are on. I have a stupid image in my mind about this. Sandra Bullock in Miss Congeniality. You remember that movie? And she's she's training to be a pageant queen, right? But she's working for the FBI. And so they get her, and Michael Caine comes and he's her trainer, and he has to train her how to be graceful and beautiful. And he's saying, and she was like a pretty tough cop that used to kind of clump around. And he said, you don't clump around, you glide. So she's practicing her gliding. She's gliding along the street, and a car beeps the horn at her. She says, hey, I'm gliding here. So I have that image in my mind. One can get into this, I'm a monk, I'm a meditator, everything's fine, everything's beautiful. And you're on another ego trip. It's just invented by your own psyche. It's not a bad place to be. Hey, I mean, it's better than getting angry at things or being miserable. But the equanimity that comes from the mind that returns to its own nature. If I leave you with one word, it would be bright. The mind becomes bright. Consciousness is purified. So Bahia was a monk. He went to see the Buddha. He heard about the Buddha. In fact, he was sitting and he was so peaceful, he thought to himself, I have attained to ultimate liberation. And a deva came and appeared before him. So goes the story in the sutta. It says, no, you are not liberated yet. Go and see the Buddha. He will tell you about liberation. So Bahia travels. He goes and finds the Buddha. And the Buddha's attendant says, oh, he's out on his arms round right now. This is not the right time to talk to him. Bahia says, but you never know when you're going to die. So he goes chasing off after the Buddha. Finds the Buddha on arms round in the village. He says, Buddha, please tell me about ultimate liberation. And the Buddha says, Now is not the time. He says, no, but I might die at any moment. Please tell me about liberation. He says, now is not the time. He says, no, but you never know when death is going to come. Please teach me about liberation. The Buddha says, now is not the time. Bahia says, no, you have to teach me about liberation. And the Buddha says, right, fine, it's like this. These were the words that he spoke. In what is seen, there is only the seen. In what is heard or known, the word sutta can mean to hear or can mean to know or to understand. In what is heard, there is only the heard. In what is thought or recognized, mutta, recognized, there is only the thought. In what is cognized, there is only the cognized. You should practice in this way. So Bahia goes and practices in this way. You notice what the Buddha is saying there is everything that you can attend to, that cognizes into your conscious attention, that is not to be held on to. You separate yourself from this entire process of cognizing objects. Then this beautiful attainments start to manifest. Funny ending to the story. Bahia says, thank you very much, and he practices and he becomes enlightened. And then he gets run over by a cow and dies. You know this story? So he was right. You never know when you're going to die. So he was right to go and pester the Buddha for the teaching. So goes the story. Don't, a lot of these are embellishments around the story. But so, the sutta ends after Bahia is killed by the cow. The Buddha had said to him, in the seen there will be just the seen, in the heard or the known there will be just the heard. In the thought of or the recognized will be just the thought. In the known or cognized will be just the known. This is how you should train yourself. Then you will not be by that object. You will not be in that object. You will not be in this world or the world beyond. This is the end of suffering. Bahia is killed by the cow. And the Buddha declares that he attained to enlightenment before he died. And he says, where water and earth and fire and air find no footing, where no stars shine, where the sun does not give its light, where the moon does not glow, but no darkness is found, then the sage, with his own understanding, through his own effort, knows the form and the formless, and from pleasure and pain they are released. So a Zen-like statement for description of enlightenment. There's a little bit of time if you have any questions. Was that hardcore Dhamma for you? From time to time I want to go into these actual teachings the way they're actually given. It's very useful to keep ourselves orientated that this is a path of enlightenment, not a path of just self-improvement. At the back. Ah. Right. This is how it's often presented. I'm going to clarify the question for everybody else. That there is vipassana, which is insight meditation, and there is samadhi, which is concentration meditation. In the original suttas, you do not find this distinction. Both of these go together and have to go together and are developed together. But concentration is misrepresented as concentrating on an object. You can concentrate on the breath, on a mantra, on a color, on light, aloka kasina. You can concentrate on a thought or a feeling like loving kindness or compassion, on dead bodies or dying bodies. By placing your mind onto an object, you will create a certain mind state depending on the object. Fluffy kittens will make you compassionate, Donald Trump will make you agitated, depending what you put your mind onto. Okay? But you will not attain to the stages of concentration meditation by focusing on an object. That is just an entry to get you started. You have to let go of that object and move into these states. And each of these states of concentration becomes its own object. If you try and hang on to the breath or the mantra or the feeling or the whatever your object is, you will not be able to attain to concentration, into jhana states, high concentration states. You have to let go of that object. And this is where I went so wrong, because most of the texts don't talk about it like that. In fact, if you go back to the original texts, they make it very clear, but the way teachers talk about it is, no, you have to concentrate on an object until you are one with the object. You can do that to a degree, but you're not going to attain anything holy or special. You've just got another state of consciousness. So for years I tried to do this, and sometimes I think, no, I'm going to do concentration today, and I'd sit and meditate, and then I'd try and get onto my breath, and then harder on my breath, and tighter on my breath, and more on my breath. And then I'd come out and I'd think, I just don't want to do that. It's so tiring. And that's the wrong way. You won't attain to these higher states that the Buddha recommended if you do that. You have to let go of the object without any doubt. Think of it this way. As I mentioned earlier, your mind reaches out and cognizes an object. The Buddha statue, the sound of the air conditioning, the feeling in your foot. It will move like a spotlight in a dark room, one thing at a time. This process has to stop for the new thing to arise. Focusing on a meditation object, you're still just in that process. You're still just putting your attention onto something. I can put my attention onto watching Shark Tank. I like Shark Tank. Or Below Deck. I don't watch much TV. There's a couple of things. A couple of YouTube things that I see. But that's putting my attention onto something. Or I can put my attention onto my breath, or onto the kittens in my corridor, or onto my Vegemite on toast. But you're still just moving your attention from one thing to another thing. This, you have to step outside of that process for the other to arise. That's when the real spiritual attainments start to arise. The things that lodge in your consciousness, that just a taste of it can propel you into a lifetime of practice. I know people that have touched this through drugs. Personally, I've never done a drug, aside from coffee, I guess. So I don't know, and I would not recommend drugs, but I know people who have done it, who have had experiences through drugs, or they've had near-death experiences, or they've had religious experiences in India or somewhere. But just touching on it is enough to let your psyche know there is something completely other than everything in my psyche. And that's why I say you don't need to spend too much time trying to fix your character or your ego, or your defense mechanisms, or letting go of suffering, or doing the work of spirituality. when you step out and see the other that arises, you say, oh yeah, none of that matters. This is as a beauty that is unsurpassable, that comes because you're not attending to anything. And it's a secret of consciousness. If you try and do this, usually your consciousness becomes dull and you start to get sleepy. You have to go through that as a meditator until these states start to manifest. Anybody else have a question? Sure, go ahead. You can't, it's impossible to say, and it depends on your karma. And also, we do want to stay away from thinking of stages, because every time you meditate is going to be different. And if today I meditate and I'm agitated because I'm trying to get my visa, then agitation is the thing that you're working with in your meditation. And if you think of it as stages, you're always trying to reject what is here and real and attain to something that isn't. So you should always start the meditation from where you are and what you're at and what your condition is. But depends on your karma. Just some people like that, some people lifetimes. Yeah. Just depends. And some people are good at loving kindness meditation, but not so good at emptiness. Some people are really good at teaching or building or become beautiful people, and other people, some enlightened people are very cantankerous. If you know Nisargadatta, he had this famous book called I Am That, which if you've read, and it's a great book. I mean, he's talking pure enlightenment. But you get the impression that he's quite cantankerous. If you're not a native English speaker, that means irritable or short-tempered. And I'd always thought this, and I was in India before I came to Thailand, and I was staying in a house of a man who he seems to have his ambition was to go around and find people who claim to be enlightened and then to test them to see if they're enlightened or not. Not my kind of thing, but anyway. And I said to him, that it doesn't mean that you become beautiful. I said, Nisargadatta sounded so cantankerous in the book, I Am That. And he started laughing, and he said, I lived with Nisargadatta for 15 years, and he said he was such a foul-tempered, irritable old man. And he said he'd be in his bedroom and he banged on the floor with his cane, and then his disciples would come up the stairs and he'd say, pass me that thing that's just at the end of my bed. So some people can develop this beauty of character, and this is a really worthy spiritual development. So each person is going to develop those qualities, different qualities. So we should try to take a holistic approach and always start from where you are. But in my view, if nobody talks about where you're pointed towards, it gets lost. And being around Dhamma for a long time, I see so much Dhamma is pseudo-psychology, and that goal becomes lost. Yeah. So there's one more question at the back. Again, depends on your karma and where you're at. This may happen in the space of 20 minutes or 20 years. We don't know. I usually say breath is a good meditation object for beginners because it can be used by everyone. Meditation on dead bodies or dying bodies, or on mantras, or on certain colours and things, or earth element, are usually quite difficult. So the Buddha himself also said breath is a really good meditation object. But that doesn't mean to say it's for beginners. I still use the breath meditation myself. It's a beautiful way to hook into your own body, to know where you are, to measure your consciousness, where you're at. Your breath can tell you so much. So the breath can be carried all the way through. We say it's suitable for everybody. So that's, I think, what my point was. Whereas other meditation objects might not be suitable for everybody. The point where you can let go of the meditation object, you can feel when the meditation object is getting in the way. The mind will come together and start to become bright. I say words bright, powerful, energized. The good key words. When this starts to happen, then you can drop whatever meditation object it was that you were using. And I've seen so many teachers that when people talk about this, they say, oh, it's piti, which is the rapture. It's just piti, ignore it, go back to your breathing. And I had one teacher say this to me, and I was using the breath, and I was starting to enter into this experience, and he said, no, that's just a rapture that's arising, don't get distracted by it. And he said, I want you to follow the in-breath, the out-breath, and then the touching of the buttocks on the seat. I'm like, man, now I've got 3 things to concentrate on. And for years I followed the advice, and it was the wrong advice. So feel for yourself, if your mind is coming together and it's bright and it's energized, you know you are not sleeping. You know this is not stillness. Stillness can be very beautiful. It's a great practice, but still just the object focused. So all I can say is feel it. Feel your way. Didn't Yoda say that to Luke Skywalker? Use your feelings, Luke. Trust your feelings, Luke. Of course, he was dropping a bomb in the Death Star at the time, but still good Dhamma. Okay, I think 8 o'clock. I'm still going to be here if you have any questions, but we're going to end the session now. Can you also mention that Jeff's going to be doing a couple of more talks to keep an eye on the website? Right. Because I didn't know about that. Other places, but it's going to go onto the Facebook group. So Jeff here, if you don't know him, is a long-time friend of mine and Dhamma teacher, terrific speaker, doesn't mumble, terrific Dhamma. So we always support Jeff when he's here. So he's going to be doing a couple more events, not on Mondays, which will go onto the...
It will be announced on Facebook, which I see still in work in progress.
Right.
We are about to organize the Dhamma talk with the Bank of China and also the Thai Health Promotion Foundation.
Okay, so that will go onto the Facebook group. Okay, if you can finish.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Pandit, for another excellent Dhamma talk. Thank all of you for being here and sharing this event, supporting each other in our practice. And as was just briefly discussed, please do look at our webpage, our Facebook and our meetup, because that's where we announce all the different meetings, not only the ones that are being held here, but like Jeff is doing other things as well. You will find them on our
If I can just do the blessing for very quickly. Sabitiyo vivajantu sabharogo vinasatu mate bhavatvantarayo sukhidikayuko bhava abhivadana sili sanicang Buddha pachayino chataro Dhamma Vadanti ayuvano sukhang balang. Sad. Cool. And whatever you do on your way home, please mind the gap between train and platform.